I don't care who your father is. In this room, the only father you have is the law, and she is not happy with you right now." Those words weren't just a warning. They were a death sentence for the arrogance of a girl who had never heard the word no in her entire life. Welcome back. Take a look at your screen. What do you see? A young woman in her early 20s, wearing a designer dress that costs more than the annual income of an average middle-class family, standing in Judge Judy's courtroom with a smirk full of defiance. This is Tiffany, the heiress to a massive real estate empire in Florida. Tiffany didn't walk into this courtroom as a defendant. She walked in like a customer at a high-end boutique, fully convinced that every problem has a price tag and that her father had already settled the bill long before she stepped through those doors. If you've ever felt the sting of injustice while watching the wealthy use their money to trample over others, if you want to see the moment that massive ego is shattered into 1,000 pieces by a woman who is small in stature but monumental in authority, then you are in the right place. Do not take your eyes off the screen, because what Judge Judy is about to do will leave you breathless. And if you believe that justice shouldn't have a VIP lane, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss these heart-pounding moments of pure accountability. The morning started with a tension in the air that was heavier than usual. It wasn't the smell of old wood or legal papers. It was the collision of two completely different worlds. On one side sat Mr. Miller, a 8-year-old retired veteran with hands calloused from a lifetime of hard labor. He stood there, his back slightly hunched, but his eyes carried the unshakable integrity of a man who has nothing left to lose but his dignity. On the other side was Tiffany. She couldn't stand still. She kept twisting the diamond ring on her finger, glancing around the room as if she were looking for a hidden camera for a reality show. Tiffany is being sued for slamming her luxury supercar through Mr. Miller's wooden fence and into his cherished garden during a late-night hit-and-run, only to leave a message through her lawyer saying, "Just send the man a check and be done with it." But Mr. Miller didn't want the money. He wanted an apology. And when that apology was met with an arrogant laugh, he turned to the only person in this country who can teach a spoiled child a lesson in character: Judge Judy. Look at the way Tiffany stands. Chin tilted high, shoulders intentionally relaxed. In the study of body language, this is the definition of false confidence, a mask built by wealth to hide a hollow soul. She looks at Judge Judy as if she's looking at a slow waitress. What Tiffany doesn't know is that Judge Judy has seen thousands of Tiffany's over the past 30 years, and she knows exactly where the weakest point in that shiny armor lies. Judge Judy steps out, the black robe rustling, her eyes as sharp as a scalpel scanning the room. She doesn't look at Tiffany's dress. She looks straight into the file. "Sit down and keep your mouth shut until I tell you to open it," Judge Judy says, her voice low but carrying the weight of a gavel. Tiffany starts to interrupt, but one look from Judy freezes her in place. The game of privilege has just ended. The battle for the truth is about to begin. The room fell into a chilling silence as Judge Judy leaned forward, her eyes scanning the documents like a predator tracking its prey. Tiffany, however, seemed completely oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere. She sat there, legs crossed, swinging a designer heel back and forth with a rhythmic, irritating click that echoed against the wooden panels. This is the body language of someone who believes they are simply visiting a world that doesn't apply to them. In her mind, this courtroom was a minor inconvenience, a temporary pause in her social calendar. Tiffany's defense was as flimsy as her sense of reality. She began to speak, her voice carrying that high-pitched, nasal tone of someone who has spent more time talking to personal assistants than to actual human beings. She didn't deny being at the scene. Instead, she attempted to redefine the truth. "It wasn't a hit and run," she claimed, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "I felt a slight bump, but I assumed it was just a pothole. Florida roads are terrible, you know? Besides, Mr. Miller's fence was already old. I'm actually doing him a favor by giving him a reason to upgrade." Mr. Miller flinched at those words. You could see his knuckles whiten as he gripped the edge of the table. For a man who spent his life protecting this country, being told that his private property and his peace were insignificant was a direct hit to his soul. But Judge Judy wasn't about to let that slide. She slammed her hand on the bench, a sound that made Tiffany jump for the first time. "A favor? You think destroying a man's sanctuary at 2 a.m. while you're smelling like a distillery is a favor?" Tiffany's smirk faltered, replaced by a look of genuine confusion, as if she couldn't understand why the help was shouting at her. She reached into her expensive handbag and pulled out a gold-plated smartphone, as if checking her messages would provide an escape from this reality. "Put the phone away, or I will have the bailiff take it and you'll never see it again," Judy barked. The first crack in Tiffany's armor appeared. Her eyes darted to the back of the room, looking for her father's legal team. But for the first time in her life, the expensive lawyers were silent. They knew what Tiffany didn't. Wealth can buy a defense, but it cannot buy Judge Judy's respect. Judy then turned her attention to the evidence, a grainy doorbell camera video from a neighbor's house. The footage showed Tiffany's car speeding, the screech of tires, and the violent impact that sent splinters of wood flying into the air. Most importantly, it showed the car stop for 3 seconds. The brake lights stayed on. Tiffany had looked. She knew exactly what she had hit. And then, she floored it, leaving an elderly man's hard work in the dirt. "You looked back, didn't you?" Judy asked, her voice dangerously calm. Tiffany hesitated. This was the moment where character is tested. Instead of owning the mistake, she doubled down on the lie. "The sun was in my eyes," she stammered. "At 2 o'clock in the morning, Tiffany? Was it the moon or the sun?" Judy countered. The gallery erupted in a low murmur of laughter. Tiffany's face turned a sharp shade of crimson. The immunity she thought her last name provided was evaporating, replaced by the cold, hard realization that in this room, her father's real estate empire was nothing more than a pile of bricks. Just when it seemed the weight of the evidence was beginning to crush Tiffany's resolve, the courtroom doors creaked open. In walked a man in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Mr. Miller's entire monthly pension. This was Tiffany's father, Robert, a man whose face was plastered on billboards across the city. He didn't walk, he glided, carrying the suffocating aura of someone who believes he owns the air he breathes. He took a seat in the gallery, crossing his legs with a calm, practiced precision, his eyes locking onto Tiffany's for a fleeting second. Suddenly, Tiffany's posture changed. The fear, the flushing cheeks, the hesitation, it all vanished. She sat up straight, her chin lifting again, emboldened by the silent command of her father's presence. She wasn't just Tiffany anymore. She was an extension of his power, and the message was clear. Do what you need to do. Say what you need to say, because I am here to fix it. "Judge," Tiffany said, her voice now dripping with a practiced, rehearsed confidence. "My father is a member of the City Development Board. He has personally contributed to the renovation of this very courthouse. I think it would be in everyone's best interest, yours included, to resolve this matter with a private settlement and avoid a public record that doesn't benefit anyone." The courtroom went deathly silent. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights, a sound so tiny it usually goes unnoticed. Mr. Miller looked down at his hands, his head hanging low, the weight of the city's elite pressing down on him like a physical force. It's a moment we've all feared, the moment where the system decides that justice has a price tag, and that the price is whatever the richest person in the room is willing to pay. But then there was Judge Judy. She didn't react with anger. She reacted with the chilling, icy calm of a storm about to break. She slowly took off her glasses, folded them, and placed them on the desk. She didn't look at the evidence anymore. She looked directly at Robert, the father, sitting in the gallery. "Sir," she said, her voice not raised, but vibrating with a terrifying clarity, "I don't know who you think you are, but you are currently a guest in this court, and you are about to find out exactly how much your city development contributions mean to the law." She turned back to Tiffany, who was now smiling, thinking her father's influence had already won the day. "Tiffany, you think you're smart. You think that because your father builds buildings, you can build a wall around yourself that the law can't penetrate. But you've made a fatal error." Judy leaned in, her gaze piercing through the expensive designer clothes, right into the character of the girl sitting before her. "You didn't just break a fence. You broke the trust of a man who served this country. And you did it with a laugh. That isn't a civil dispute, young lady. That is a moral bankruptcy." The gallery shifted. Someone whispered. Tiffany's father's face hardened, his hand tightening on his expensive leather briefcase. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that his name didn't open this door. In this room, he wasn't a powerful tycoon. He was just a man watching his daughter's arrogance dismantle her own future. The air in the courtroom grew thick, almost suffocating, as Judge Judy reached for a yellow folder that had been sitting untouched at the corner of her desk. This wasn't the police report. This wasn't the insurance claim. This was something Tiffany hadn't prepared for. Tiffany's father, Robert, shifted in his seat, his polished exterior starting to show the first signs of genuine sweat. He knew that look on Judy's face. It was the look of someone who had just found the smoking gun. "Tiffany," Judy began, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt more intimidating than a shout. "You told this court that the reason you didn't stop was because you thought it was a pothole. You told me your father's influence and your family's status make you a person of integrity. But I have a transcript here from the local impound lot and a recorded phone call you made to your private mechanic just 20 minutes after the incident." Tiffany's smirk didn't just fade, it disintegrated. Her face, once a canvas of expensive makeup and arrogance, became a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. In the study of human behavior, we call this the collapse of the persona. When the lies you've built to protect your ego are suddenly incinerated by the truth, the body has nowhere to hide. Tiffany began to chew on her lip, a nervous habit that betrayed her designer image. Judy opened the file and read aloud, "I hit some old guy's fence. My car is scratched. Get it in the shop tonight. I don't care what it costs. Just make sure the paint matches before anyone sees it." The gallery didn't just murmur this time. They gasped. Mr. Miller, the veteran, slowly raised his head. For the first time, he didn't look like a victim. He looked like a man witnessing a long overdue reckoning. He looked at Tiffany, not with anger, but with a profound sense of pity. He saw a young woman who had been given everything in the world except a conscience. "You didn't think about the old guy, did you, Tiffany?" Judy asked, her gaze burning into the girl. "You didn't think about whether he was lying on the ground, unable to breathe, or if his life's work in that garden was ruined. All you cared about was the paint on your bumper." Robert stood up from the gallery, his hand raised as if he were in a corporate boardroom. "Your Honor, this is an invasion of privacy. That call was personal." Judy didn't even look up at him. She just pointed a finger toward the door. "Sit down, sir, or you will find out exactly how private a jail cell can be. I'm talking to your daughter, whom you have clearly failed to raise with even an ounce of humanity." Tiffany was now trembling. The immunity she thought she wore like a shield had turned into a weight, pulling her down. She realized that her father's billboards, his money, and his name were powerless against a simple recorded truth. This was the moment the audience had been waiting for, the high and mighty heiress, stripped of her armor, standing exposed in the cold light of justice. The streak she had maintained her whole life, of never facing a consequence, was officially over. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, a sound that usually signals the end of a long day. But today, it sounded like a countdown. Tiffany stood before the bench, her hands no longer fidgeting with her ring. They were clasped tightly in front of her, the knuckles white. She looked smaller now, stripped of the bravado she had walked in with. Her father, Robert, had stopped pacing. He sat stiffly, his eyes darting between Judge Judy and the bailiff, as if calculating the cost of a war he suddenly realized he couldn't win. "Tiffany," Judge Judy began, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "for years, you have been protected by a name that you didn't earn, and a bank account that shielded you from the consequences of being a decent human being. You thought that fence you crashed through was the only thing you damaged. You were wrong. You damaged the very idea that we are all held to the same standard of accountability." Tiffany tried to speak, her voice trembling. "Judge, my father is willing to pay double, triple the damages. We just want to move past this." "Move past this?" Judy cut her off, her eyes flashing with a righteous intensity that made the room temperature seem to drop 10 degrees. "You don't get to move past a lack of character, young lady. Money is a tool, not a get-out-of-jail-free card. And today, your tool is useless." Judy turned to the bailiff. "Bailiff, please mark the record. This court finds the defendant liable for reckless operation, leaving the scene of an accident, and blatant disregard for public safety. Furthermore, due to the defendant's attempt to obstruct the truth through coerced testimony, I am levying the maximum fine allowed under the law, and I am ordering a formal suspension of her driving privileges for the next 6 months." Robert surged forward, his face flushed with a dark, dangerous anger. "This is an outrage. You have no idea who you're dealing with. This case will be reviewed, and I will ensure that." Judy didn't even flinch. She raised her gavel, and the sound of it hitting the bench echoed like a gunshot, silencing him instantly. "Sir, if you speak one more word in this courtroom, you will be escorted out in handcuffs for contempt. Your who you are ends at that door. In here, you are just a man who failed to teach his daughter that people matter more than paint jobs. If you don't like the ruling, file an appeal. But for now, you will sit down, you will be silent, and you will watch your daughter face the reality you helped create. The father sank back into his chair, his face gray. He looked defeated, his posture broken. The power he had wielded like a weapon had been disarmed. Tiffany looked at him, her eyes searching for a savior that was no longer there. It was the moment every person in that room had been waiting for, the realization that money, status, and influence are just illusions when faced with the raw, unyielding weight of the truth. The bailiff escorted Tiffany toward the exit of the courtroom, but not before Judge Judy leveled one final, piercing instruction. "Tiffany, before you leave, look at Mr. Miller's hands. Really look at them." Tiffany froze. She turned and saw the man she had hurt, the man whose garden she had shattered. His hands were weathered, marked by the years of labor that had built his life, a life she had dismissed as unimportant. "Those hands built the fence you destroyed," Judy said, her voice echoing in the still room. "They represent a lifetime of effort, not just a property line. Since you believe your time is so valuable, you will now learn the value of someone else's labor." The punishment wasn't just a fine, it was a lesson in humility. Judge Judy ordered Tiffany to complete 80 hours of community service at the exact community center where Mr. Miller volunteered his time on weekends. She wasn't allowed to hire someone to do it for her. She wasn't allowed to wear her designer clothes. She had to show up in a work uniform, ready to scrub floors, clean the facility, and assist the elderly volunteers who relied on that space. If you miss 1 hour, or if the director reports a single instance of an entitled attitude, you will find yourself sitting in a county jail cell until that time is made up, Judy declared. The courtroom buzzed. For Tiffany, who had never even cleared her own dinner table, the idea of scrubbing floors for the very demographic she looked down upon was a sentence worse than any prison term. It wasn't about the labor, it was about the humiliation of the ego. As Tiffany walked out, the camera caught her face. The designer makeup was smeared. The poise was gone. She looked like exactly what she was, a frightened, misguided girl who had been handed everything and understood nothing. Her father followed a few steps behind, his suit looking strangely ill-fitted, his confidence entirely stripped away. He didn't offer a hand to help her. He didn't offer a word of comfort. He was too busy wondering how he would explain this to his business partners and his social circle. It was a masterclass in behavioral psychology. When you strip away the symbols of power, the car, the name, the lawyer, the father, what is left? In Tiffany's case, there was nothing but a hollow shell. She walked past the gallery, but for the first time, she didn't look at the people sitting there. She didn't look at them because she couldn't stand the reflection of her own inadequacy in their eyes. She had spent her life looking down on the world, and now, for the first time, the world was looking down on her. The transformation was starting. It wasn't the sentence that changed her. It was the realization that the world didn't move for her. As she reached the double doors, she paused, glancing back one last time at the courtroom. She wasn't looking for her father. She was looking at Judge Judy, who was already on to the next case. Her focus shifted, her authority absolute. The entitled heiress had walked in looking for an easy exit. She walked out with the most difficult, yet necessary task of her life, becoming a human being. The first Saturday at the Aldrich Street Community Kitchen was, for Tiffany, nothing short of a nightmare. She arrived in oversized, ill-fitting clothes, her expensive manicure clashing painfully with the rubber gloves she was handed. She expected to be treated like a visitor, a temporary fixture. Instead, the kitchen director, a stern, no-nonsense woman who had seen everything, put her straight to work in the dish pit. The first few hours were a brutal collision with reality. The steam, the smell of grease, and the sheer physical demand of standing for hours in a hot, crowded space were things Tiffany had never encountered. She wasn't an heiress here. She was just the girl who broke the fence. Every time a volunteer walked past her, she felt the weight of their judgment, or worse, their indifference. But as the weeks passed, a subtle shift began to occur. It didn't happen because of a grand speech or a dramatic epiphany. It happened in the quiet moments. It happened when she started to notice the faces of the people she served. She began to see the elderly man who came in every single Tuesday for a hot meal, the same man she had almost crippled months ago. She realized that these people weren't just the public. They were individuals with stories, struggles, and a dignity that was completely independent of their bank accounts. One Saturday, while mopping the floor near the exit, Tiffany stopped. She watched Mr. Miller, the very man whose garden she had destroyed, walk through the doors to volunteer his own time to help serve meals. Their eyes met. For a split second, Tiffany felt the old defensive walls trying to rise up. the urge to look away and pretend she didn't see him. But she held his gaze. She didn't apologize with words. She simply bowed her head, a small, humble gesture that said more than any prepared statement ever could. Mr. Miller didn't smile, but he didn't turn away, either. He just nodded, a silent acknowledgement that she was, at the very least, showing up. In the solitude of her evenings, Tiffany stopped checking her phone for her father's approval. She began to look at her life through the lens of what she had seen in that kitchen. She realized that the immunity her name provided was actually a cage that had kept her from understanding what it meant to be a real, functioning human being. She stopped seeing herself as a protected daughter and began, for the first time, to see herself as someone who had a debt to pay to the world. She started arriving at the kitchen 30 minutes early. She started learning the names of the regulars. She even began to take pride in the way she scrubbed the heavy industrial pots until they shone. It was a strange, unfamiliar pride, not the pride of owning something, but the pride of earning something. The entitled heiress was fading, and in her place, a young woman was beginning to emerge, one who understood that the true measure of a person isn't what they can take from the world, but what they can contribute to it. The streak of arrogance had been broken, not by the judge's gavel, but by the work itself. The courtroom was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of the beginning. It was the calm of a storm that had passed, leaving behind a new, clearer landscape. Tiffany stood at the threshold of the courtroom, her hand resting on the heavy brass handle of the double doors. She didn't look like the girl who had walked in weeks ago, draped in designer vanity and blinded by the arrogance of her last name. She looked like someone who had finally seen the world for what it truly is, a place where dignity is earned, not bought. Judge Judy watched her for a brief moment, her sharp eyes softening just a fraction. It was a rare, fleeting expression, the look of a teacher who sees a student finally grasp the lesson after a long, difficult struggle. "Tiffany," Judy said, her voice devoicée of the earlier bite, "you have a long road ahead of you. But remember this, the only name that carries any weight in this life is the one you build with your own integrity." Tiffany nodded, then pushed the doors open and walked out. She wasn't followed by a legal team. She wasn't followed by her father's influence. She walked alone, and for the first time, she walked with a purpose that was entirely her own. This story isn't just about a crashed fence or a court ruling. It's about the most important lesson any of us can learn, that accountability is not a punishment, it is a choice. It is the choice to own our mistakes, to face our flaws, and to decide that the person we become tomorrow will be better than the one we were yesterday. No amount of money, no family legacy, and no title can ever replace the quiet strength of a person who knows who they are and takes full responsibility for their actions. If you've ever felt the sting of injustice, if you believe that every single child, regardless of their family's wealth or their father's name, deserves to learn what humility and empathy truly mean, then subscribe to this channel right now. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because these lessons shouldn't be locked away in a courtroom. They belong to all of us. In this room, everyone is equal. Every single one. Thank you for watching, and remember, character is what you do when you think no one is watching. Make it count.